And there we go. Hi, everybody. This is Helena de Monk from the Oxygen4Leadership Summit, and welcome to this live session, Minding Your Power and Hack Your Brain Through Rocking Change. I am here with Gregory Cajina. He's Spanish, but he's joining us from Germany. And Gregory is a leader, an entrepreneur, an education advisor. He's an international speaker and best-selling author, and he is also the co-founder of the Core School of Leaders and the Inner Change program. And he's calling himself an unteacher. Welcome, Gregory. And I feel you need to explain that a little bit before you start.
Okay, when I mean unteacher, what I mean to say is that in order to learn things, the brain is designed in such a way that we first start learning things without questioning them, as we will see right now. And it turns out that then we carry some. So first, as we will see right now, in order to try to help people or push people to unlearn things before they can learn new things that might be more effective and more efficient for their lives.
Nice. Awesome. Thank you for the answer. I'm seeing that we do not have a lot of bandwidth, so there is some delay. Please bear with us. We will try to find a solution. In the meantime, Gregory, I'm going to disappear here, see if that helps. And the floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you, Helena. Okay, welcome to this presentation, Minding Your Power, Hack Your Brain Through Rocking Change. And the question is, are we our minds? The first question I would like to pose to you, who are we? This was a question that has been asked for decades, and one which Richard Precht, which is a philosopher, answered in a book by adding to that another question, which was, and how many of us are inside here? We've been trying to answer this question, but first we should go a little bit, let's delve a little bit into neuroscience. It's often the case that we try to update the software of our mobiles, of our cell phones, our computers, our tablets, but many other times we don't really have the software of our brain as updated as we should. So in just all the decisions we make, all the actions we take are based on what we decide in here. We talk about a 3-in-1 model. It's not that we have 3 different brains that are separate from each other or isolated from each other, but it's a way to understand 2 million years of evolution. What is the first brain? I'm sure you've heard about it. It's the lizard. It's the brain that we share with all living beings, animals, I mean. We have the main force behind the lizard brain is to survive. And survive includes breathing, digestion, and reproduction. What evolution brought after that lizard brain was the leopard or the mammal or the limbic system or the mammal brain, if you want. And it's got, of course, several parts, but the most important we should know, and we will come back to these after, is the hypothalamus, hippocampus, and amygdala, which are responsible for aggression, for mating, for conduct, hunger, thirst, for memory, and of course for fear and for emotions. The third addition to our brain is what we're going to call the learning brain. And this is what supposedly makes us so special with regards to other animals. We are able to tie our shoes, to button our shirts, to solve some complex mathematical questions, at least if you remember. We're able to learn languages, and it's plainly what we call the executive brain. So plainly, that's the physics of it. We have 3 brains in one, but we are also chemistry and electricity. We're also subject to molecules of information. That are inside our brain or nervous system, they communicate with each other to transmit and communicates with other cells throughout the body through the bloodstream. What happens, these are some of the main neurohormones that are brain works, we make, why they're some effective, why we still hold on to them, even though they are not really that effective anymore. And among them, we find as neurotransmitters, for example, norepinephrine, which is involved, amongst other things, long-term memory and the fight-flight response. Dopamine, of course, as we know, the internal drug, it's involved in the reward system of our brain. Endorphins, or the inner morphine, is a painkiller, opium-like, which we get when we do physical exercise, especially if it's strenuous, or when we do yoga, or even when we eat some chile, some hot chile. Serotonin, when it's high or low, we feel relaxed, or we feel the opposite, we feel depressed. And a couple of hormones. We have the oxytocin, which is called the love hormone, which is also involved into what we call a healthy stress. And we have cortisol, which is a stress hormone, which is, let's call it, the bad stress. So why is this important? We have a little background. How does our brain work? Now, the physics, the chemistry, the electricity, all these things combined make a very complex system that brings us to questions sometimes in our life leading. It's often the case that we realize that we're living this, or we're living 1 year and 2 years and 3 years and 4 years. It just has the feeling that we've lived the same day 365 times, or we've lived the same year for the past 10 years. And it's often the case, one of the things I do, one of the things we do in my school, is we coach people. And then one of the first questions we ask is, well, why are we coaching? Why do you want a coaching process? What is the interest for you in getting a coaching process? And many people start wondering, well, I want to reach better goals, or I want to get more money, or I want to change jobs, or I want to improve my communication skills, or I want to find a purpose or find a meaning. But in the end, when you keep asking and why, then many people say, well, I want to learn a bit more about leadership. I want to know about how to lead my life, and I'm going through this coaching process because bottom line, what I want to do is, I just want to be happy. And this is where we look at the people and we start saying, well, we might just have a wee tiny little piece of bad news for you. And that is that coaching is not there to make sure you are happy. And why is that? From a specific standpoint, first of all, it's difficult to understand or to agree on a definition of what happy means. And one of the definitions from psychology is that people are either happy or they are not happy. In other words, the key word here is the verb to be. And in this sense, the trait of being happy is something as genetic as the color of your eyes, or your height, or the length of your arms, or the length of your fingers, or if you're a male or a female. It's plainly ingrained into us. It's genetic. So trying to be happy through a coaching process or any goal you undertake in life is like trying to change the color of your eyes just by sheer willpower or force of determination. It just doesn't work. When we take it from the standpoint of neuroscience or psychology, one of the definitions of somebody who's has the temperament of being happy has to do with two specific factors. One, that person is tolerant to change. And the second, that person has a strong base of relationships, that has a tendency to make relationships, that wherever he or she goes, he or she kind of makes connections in a quick way, finds a cushion, finds a mattress where they can lie back. And at the same time, they take changes in a very strong way. They don't resist the change. Sometimes they feel a bit overwhelmed, sometimes they feel burdened, but they are not scared by change. They are tolerant to change. They embrace change. They are looking forward to it. And that is genetic. What is the problem then? So we say, okay, so coaching cannot be to be happy or become happy because that's a genetic trait. And it turns out that what research says is that 15% of the population, 15% of the population is naturally happy. You probably come across some of these people. It doesn't matter what happens to them. they always seem to be able to keep moving forward. Maybe they lost a job or they were fired from a job. Of course, that doesn't make them laugh, but they have somehow this inner strength that they know they can move on, they can move forward, and it's all right. Maybe they are going through a difficult separation or a divorce, and of course, that doesn't make them jump in with joy, but they still they don't lose their balance. They move forward, they carry on, they're strong to move on. It's amazing. It's this kind of people who seem to be almost permanently with a smile, if not in their face, and in their energy and the way they move and their stance and their gait. They're permanently moving forward. So, and we cannot change that. It's genetic. So then the next question when we ask, okay, why do you want to get some coaching process? Okay, well then if I cannot be happy, because that would be as difficult as changing the color of my eyes, then maybe I want to feel happy. I want to feel better. I know life is very stressful, it's very demanding, but I want to feel happier. And then we say, well, we might have another piece of bad news for you. And that is that feeling happy is just a dream. And why is that just a dream? If we go a little bit back in history, we can understand more or less, the last 200 years since Romanticism as a philosophical or literature trend started, where people were starting to question whether freedom in itself was genuine, whether we should strive to show and display our individuality. But the problem is that at the same time, we start trying to be the best version of ourselves. And that has emotional-based decisions. As we know, for example, from Antonio Damasio, the neuroscientist, the Portuguese-American neuroscientist. So we're plainly making decisions based on emotion. And emotion is very volatile. Sometimes we wake up for no reason. We feel very joyful, very happy. Sometimes nothing really stressful happened, but we wake up in a bad temper or moody, or we don't really know what's going on. But still, for the last 200 years, more or less, we have been trusting our decisions on emotionality, on I want to be and feel happy. I want to experience joy. It's my right in this planet to experience joy, to feel the bliss of life. And there's nothing good and there's nothing bad with it. But until 200 years before, if people didn't really stick in communities, people would just plainly not survive. And what happens if you add 200 years of romanticism and focus on individualism and focus on emotion? What happens if we add that to consumism? It turns out that our marketing gurus have found out the exact different signs you see there, the different posters, they're all advertisements in different languages. From Latin America, from Europe, you have Spanish, you have English, you have German, and it's always the same thing. It's buy happiness, it's buy joy, is enjoy happiness if you vote for me. If you drink tea, you're going to feel happy. If you put this cosmetic on your face, you're going to feel happy. If you drink this beer, if you buy in this supermarket, you will feel bliss. So what happens is that in the end, what we're actually doing is stimulating, we're tickling a little part of our brain that is called the nucleus accumbens, which is the pleasure center. Well, it's involved in the pleasure center of our brain. And our brain is not dumb. And the brain is designed in such a way. Of course, what do we want to do? We want to engage into more pleasure. We try to seek more pleasure. We're looking for ways to experience more pleasure and, of course, less pain, which would be the opposite. So what happens then? We start sitting in front of somebody and say, okay, why do you want to improve your leadership skills? Why do you want to get a coaching process done? Why do you want to change jobs? Why do you want to improve your communication skills? Why do you want to work better as a team member? Why do you want to decide or find what the purpose or your mission of your life is? So we say, okay, to be happy. it's kind of volatile. I can always feel happy watching a video of kittens on YouTube, or I can also feel happy by eating some chocolate or doing some exercise or hugging some. Then suddenly we feel happy, or suddenly we feel the opposite. We go with a smile to work, and then maybe we have a conflict with a colleague, then we go back home and we're upset, we're cross, we're not happy anymore. So we come to be, in a sense, we become dependent of other things, other people, other circumstances, everything that is outside of us. So then at this point in the conversation, the person in front of us would sit back and say, okay. I'm putting down my expectations. If I cannot be happy, and feeling happy is something that I can control to a limited way, and for that you don't really need coaching, or what could I do to reach at least a good state, or a state of well-being, or well-being well? How could I spend most of the time feeling well? And here we start explaining what is one of the problems that our 3-in-1 brain has. When we have the reptilian brain, we have the lizard brain. What is the main goal of it? I mean, the main goal of any animal, of any living being, is just to see the sun rays the next day. It's just to survive. So anything we do as humans, as mammals, as animals, superior animals, let's call it that way, is based on survival. So if today I feel fairly warm, if I'm not hungry, if I feel fairly loved and I have somebody to love, if I would say that I can cross the street without being concerned that somebody's going to mug me, that somebody's going to take something away from me, then the brain understands that, there's no real reason to do anything differently. Just stay the way you are. Don't complicate things. It's very cozy here. Just don't make life complicated. If this is working, just leave it as it is. But that's the lizard brain. On the other side of the ring, what do we have there? We have the cortex, or the thinking brain, or the neocortex, the one that is responsible, the last for executive decisions, the one that was the last addition from the evolutionary point of view. And what does this one want? What does this brain want? This brain is excited and stimulated and provoked by achievement. In other words, if you're too quiet, if you're too calm, if things have become fairly stable and predictable, it's time to move. It's time to do something. Come on, get up. Stop being lazy. Get something. Achieve. Why? Because when we achieve, we stimulate this nucleus accumbens of ours, this pleasure center of the brain. So what do? Stimulate it more with the lizard brain says, are you out of your mind? Just stay the way you are. Please don't complicate things. And that's the daily conflict that we experience every day we wake up. There, what you see on the slide is two different ways of understanding this at the same way. Let's say that the lizard brain, it's not exactly like that, but let's say that the lizard brain would be subconscious. It's the drive of the subconscious. When subconscious is more important than conscious, we stay as we are. And it keeps us alive, but it doesn't necessarily keep us happy. If our basic needs are covered, and there's no real reason to do anything else, we just move on in life, but we start getting bored. And with a lack of challenges and boredom sets in, when there's a lot of time, day after day, week after week, month after month, in which nothing changes, it's then when an emotion starts popping in, which is called sadness. And sadness, when it's not overcome through some kind of achievement, leads to melancholy. And melancholy and the sense of learned helplessness, like we cannot and should not do anything, leads and can lead and will lead to depression. And why is that? Because the brain was designed to find a balance between reflection, in other words, from thinking, and from acting. If we think too much, we become depressed. But if we do too much without thinking, it's like going like a chick without a head, like a beheaded chicken, just running around without really knowing where they're going. So too much action leads to going like crazy in life, just doing things without really understanding what we're doing. But too much thinking leads to self-destruction. What do we have to the right? We have to the right some people that have decided in their life that their conscious brain, in other words, the cortex, the one that is focused on achievement, on moving forward, on reaching new areas and discovering new seas and moving forward and gaining and conquering new lands. These are the people that let that part of their brain overcome their fear, even their laziness, as we will see later. There you have the pictures, for example, of Richard Branson, the founder of Virgin. You have Rafael Nadal, the tennis master. You have J.K. Rowling, the author from Harry Potter and others, and a Spanish cardiologist called Valentin Fuster, one of the most prestigious doctors in the world. And all these people, of course, they felt at some point the fear of doing something else. Of course, at some point they felt, oh, let's just stay the way we are. Let's not move things too much because it's complicated and it's risky. No, they decide, okay, I feel the fear. I feel the comfortableness of my sofa or of my predictable job or what I would expect in a normal 9 to 5, but I move forward instead. Do I have the guarantee of success? No, of course not. Now we see them and we admire them, but we just see the end. Let's call it the end product or the image of many years of work, but we don't see all the infinite number of hours that they devoted, not only to work on their project, but to work on themselves, to say, okay, to what point do I want to let my lizard brain overcome what I am as a human? What can I achieve in this very short period of time that we call life? But we're going to be finding some obstacles. And why is that? Because the lizard brain wants to make sure you don't move, and the achievement brain wants to make sure you become the best version of yourself every specific day, every day, until the last day we're here. And we're going to find some obstacles that our brain is going to be putting in front of us. First of all, I'm going to ask you a question. Would you spot the differences between these two pictures? You look at them and you say, okay, to the left, there's a group of Bushmen. They're sitting in a circle. They are together. It seems that everybody's listened to equally. It seems that everybody has a say. It seems that even though there's a leader, everybody has the chance to participate, to engage. To the right, we see maybe it's a conference or the presentation of a product. We just see a bunch of people looking at a leader. But what is also another difference? Plainly, the Bushmen is the picture to the left. The Bushman tribes are considered to be the closest to the way we as Homo sapiens were 200,000 years ago, more or less, depending on the sources, 200,000, 300,000 years ago. What are the differences then? In terms of DNA, in terms of brain, there's not really much of a difference. But the way we live has changed hugely. So, for example, we see that in 2 million years, the last 2 million years since our genes split from the Australopithecus, which is our father's ancestor, 2 million years we have spent hunting and gathering. To eat, we just bothered to get what we needed to eat. We ate it. We didn't destroy anything else. We didn't build things. We didn't get a mortgage. We just concentrated on surviving 1, 2, 3 days at a time. But then what happened one day is that somebody from this tribe realized that by collecting some seeds that they were eating, they were going back and forth on a path, maybe on a camp where the tribe was based. He or she discovered that as the seasons would pass, some of the little seeds that fell off the pouch, suddenly they would start growing. So they were thinking, okay, hold on. We've been, let's say, almost 2 million years hunting and gathering. Of course, depending on the weather, when it gets very cold, we have to move on and we have to carry our stuff. We start feeling a bit lazy. How about if, instead of chasing after the food, why don't we start growing our own food? Which makes sense. You say, why complicate our life? I mean, if I can grow here the vegetables or the fruits that I'm going to eat, that my tribe is going to eat, it makes sense. But then after about 200 years ago as well, more or less, we had the Industrial Revolution. And it turned out that we hopped from nomads, from people that would spend the whole day standing, walking, running, chasing animals or being chased by animals. We changed into agriculture, which is plainly working the land and domesticating some animals. And then we decided about 200 years ago that the best dream of any professional will be to find a job to make sure you're 40 years sitting in an office. And the question is, are we really wired for this? Is this the way humans have been made for? Has DNA changed so much that our bums are becoming bigger than our brains, that we don't think anymore how we're going to eat, we just open the refrigerator? So are we really wired to be sitting in an office for 200 years? What are the differences as well? Since then, if we take the tribe to the left, let's suppose that was about 200,000 years ago, and we compare it to our society today, the Western world, which I would even venture to say that the Western world is pretty much the way more and more countries are adopting as a lifestyle. We eat more. Today, there are many people in the world that are dying of starvation, but at the same time, they're dying from too much eating. We're in a worse physical shape because the people on the left, they plainly had lots of protein, lots of vegetables. They were eating insects. They were plainly eating no fat. Sugar was not discovered except for fruits. So they were plainly moving the whole time in order to eat, to move, to change, to run, to play. And today we spend an average office work, spend 8 hours sitting in a chair, then we take a car, maybe 2 hours a day, then we come home, we're too tired, so we sit on the sofa. We work more and more and worse and worse. According to some anthropologists, when we wanted to hunt big animals, like the people to the left, they would do so maybe once every 2 or 3 days. And the rest of the time was devoted to playing, to creating tools, to making love, to playing with children, to resting, to telling stories, to discover new things, because food was plainly covered for. What happens now to the right is that we work on average 40 hours a week, and that's what the contract says. Maybe we work 50 hours, or we work 60 hours, and we eat less, we eat worse, and most of the time we're doing things that are completely absurd and irrelevant and have no real purpose, except of course to pay bills, which is a very good reason. So in the end, we've transformed, we've shifted from a community of nomads to farmers, and then from farmers, by where that would be the end of our ecosystems, we shifted the importance of using things we needed and taking from nature what we needed, making sure we don't destroy much. We started changing the shift from use to possession. And what did that bring? That would bring the need to say that something is mine. Before, things were ours, but now the things are mine. And this is one of the self-obstacles I'm going to be presenting here. It's fairly recent that our society has tried to bring safety to our lives, especially since the Second World War. There's been a boom, for example, in mortgages, because we believe that buying a house, for example, would guarantee my financial success when I retire, when I grow old. From the anthropology standpoint, we are not really made to be monogamous. And still, I mean, we look at statistics and 50% of the people, more or less, already get divorced. And still, people marry every day, everywhere in the world with a promise and the commitment for a lifetime love, monogamy in the sentimental and sexual point of view. We want to feel more safe physically, so we get all kinds of insurances. We get health insurance, and we get life insurance, and we get any kind of insurance that would, as the word says, we want to feel sure, we want to feel safe. And of course, from a professional standpoint, thanks to our unions, we have to say that, but thanks to our unions, in some countries, from our listeners here, have some contracts, some labor contracts, some work contracts that guarantee specific rights to workers. So you have unending contract. You cannot be fired. You stay there. You work for the government, and nobody can do anything for you. So again, we try to look for some stability. But the truth is that at the end of the day, what we do is we invest huge amounts of energy and time, and many times of frustration, trying to make sure we get the safe thing for our life. In other words, we try to be in control. And this is the self-obstacle number 2. What happens if you asked your great-great-grandparents? They would tell you, in many cases, I'm quite sure that they would be entrepreneur themselves. Probably they were making jam, as mine were, or they were shoemakers, as my grandparents were. And big companies, big multinationals were out of the point. Insurances were out of the point. Pensions, what is that? They were living for the day. And they knew that crap happens. I would use the other word, but this is going to be recorded. So crap happens in life. And it's all right. Would that have made them happy? Yeah, of course not. But that's the way life was. And what happens is that they knew what they could and they could not control. And what happens in our society is where we try to control too much. And what science says, or brain says, is that we can only control 2 things. And one of them is what we say, and the other thing is what we do. Not even what we think is in our full control, because approximately 10,000 of our thoughts every day, I would say more than 95% of them are automatic. And why is that? Because our brain works with habits. It turns out that our brain takes a lot of energy to function. So the best way that nature found to make sure we would not consume too many calories is to make sure everything would be as automated as possible. But in other words, that we would work pretty much like zombies. And that would be the obstacle number 3. We are plainly the way we let our habits lead us. We are a summary of our habits. Anytime we started doing something for a first time, and then a second time, and then a third time, and then a 20th time, that becomes a habit. And it becomes so deeply ingrained in our subconscious that we don't challenge it anymore. We just accept it as it is. That's the way things are done. This is the way they have to stay. And then we spend years and decades doing the same thing over and over again, even though it doesn't work anymore. What is the self-obstacle number 4? This is the tendency that our brain has to apply the procrastination principle, which means, as we all know, we will try to leave for tomorrow what we could perfectly do today. In this sense, there is a moral behind it, and that is that we categorize people, we judge people, telling them that they are lazy. But the truth of the matter is that we are all lazy by definition. Not only us, every living being is being designed to work as less as possible with as little as possible amount of calories per day. That is because our brain is like the computer of a Ferrari. It takes a lot of energy. When it's resting, let's say it's more or less, it's 2% of our body mass. So if I'm about, let's say I'm about 80 kilos, if my brain would be 1.6 more or less kilos, it would still use 20% of the calorie intake I take every day. And that's when I'm sleeping, when I'm at rest. So your brain, when you're resting, is taking 20% of the calories, 20%, even though it weighs more or less 2% of your body mass. And that is the way of nature telling us, you know what, if you're going to do something different, if you're going to change a habit, that takes a lot of calories. Because when you do it as a zombie, when you do it automatically, when you don't really question what it is you're doing, when you do it without really thinking, well, you barely use calories. Right now, if you speak your mother language, if you're speaking your mother tongue with somebody, you don't really think. You just talk because it's automated. It's a habit. If you had to learn a new language and then give a presentation in a language that is not yours, and you're still learning the language, you're still struggling, by the time you finish that 1 hour presentation, it's very likely you would be exhausted because that's your brain asking and requesting lots of calories. What happens when, for example, you want to do something differently? Maybe you don't have the habit to go to the gym. So, of course, the first time you go to the gym, you feel very strong, very motivated. But after the second time, you say, oh, this is too much. And the third time, oh, it's too cold outside, it's snowing. I think I'm going to stay home. And in the end, you don't do it. Because the habit is telling you that you have to use lots of calories to change a habit. And if you want to use many calories, your survival brain says, leave it as it is. Are you still alive? Are you still breathing? Can you still see the sunrise? Then forget it. Don't really complicate your life. And that's where our social media and our internet products, our marketing gurus, here's where they come in with the weapons of mass distraction, as you see on the slide. So plainly, we are all lazy by nature, but it's also a sense or an importance to decide when to be lazy. Of course, it's important sometimes to just lie back and do nothing. It's very important actually to come to some creative ideas. But when this laziness beats us, it's when nothing in the end gets done. And as we know, nothing gets done. We start feeling sad, we start feeling melancholic, and then we get depressed. Then we have the self-obstacle number 5. What is this obstacle is, fear. And many people would say, I don't want to be fearful anymore. I don't want to feel fear anymore. I don't want to be afraid of anything. Well, if that would be the case, then we would probably not be alive, because fear is as we said, it's ingrained in the lizard brain, and it's necessary for us to be alive, to stay alive. And many people question, how many fears then are we born with? And what science says is that we're born with two fears. One is to sudden noise. So, for example, if you've had babies or you're near babies, you probably saw that you can vacuum clean the floor. There's a train that can pass by near a train near a child's window, and the baby will continue sleeping, no problem. But if you go with a pan and you suddenly bang the pan with a wooden spoon and you stun the child, and of course it would start crying because it's out of fear. That's the way we were designed, to have our attention drawn to anything that sounds sudden, because it could be a predator. This is an experiment by Watson, by the way. This was an experiment done, let's say, that's morally questionable, but this is one of the conclusions he came up with. And the second fear is the fear to fall. If you've been to a delivery room, you've probably seen that as soon as the baby comes out of the mother, the doctor just holds the baby and lets him loose for a fraction of a second to see if there's a reaction to hold on to something, which is something primal that we still hold from holding on to branches and trees. And that is because we're afraid of falling. So if we're afraid of falling and we're afraid of sudden noise, that means that the rest of the fears in our life, the rest of fears are learned. And some of them with good intention from the adults that took care of us, especially in the first 6-7 years of our life. Many of them, of course, we learned ourselves. So when we were fooling around with a fork inside a socket or playing with electricity and we got a little shock, then don't play with a fork inside the socket, inside the electricity. That's a bad idea. That's something we learn. But in many cases, we also learn according to the society, the group, the community we're in. So for example, let's say you have a stable job, you have a boss, and you decide one day you want to start up your own company. Depending on your community, your city, your country, your culture, the people you're surrounded with, they're going to tell you, yes, do it, go ahead for it. Or they will tell you, are you out of your mind? I mean, why in the world would you want to do that? In other words, we end up becoming the people that are around us to a great extent. And in terms of fear, we also talked about Murphy's Law. And this Murphy's Law is, we believe that if something can go wrong, our brain will assume that it will go wrong. And again, that's our survival brain keeping us alive. The In this sense, we're going to talk about the comfort zone very shortly. Comfort zone, as we know, is the sofa. That's where we are. We're comfortable. Everything's predictable. Nothing to worry about. And then we sometimes draw this circle, this concentric circle around it. We call it the fear area. The places where we can find the goals, we can find those kinds of projects that really motivate us. And it makes us a bit uncomfortable. It makes us a bit, concerned. But we could do it. If we get down to it, we could do it. But then there are other goals that are what we call the panic zone. And in the panic zone, it just doesn't make any sense to even define it as a goal, define it as an objective. Why? Because there's a part of our brain that connects, let's call it this way, it connects and disconnects the subconscious and subconscious brain. That part it's called a reticular activating system. It's like a little trigger. So if at this specific point, right now, immediately, something at a panic level would happen to you, suddenly you're stunned, you're scared by something, and you're completely in panic, and I would freeze the image. And right now, I would ask you what your name is. You wouldn't be able to answer me. You wouldn't be able to answer me, amongst other reasons, because you wouldn't have even heard me. And that's because our brain stops thinking. Our thinking brain shuts down and just resorts to the lizard brain, which is survival. And as we know, fight, flight, freeze. What happens with a fear? To the left, you have the conscious thinking on the vertical axis. To the right, you have on the vertical axis how the subconscious or automatic brain decides. Down at the bottom, that red line, the horizontal line, you have the sense of control or self-control. So there's a shift, there's a movement from left to right. What happens when we're in a neutral state of mind to the left? Okay, our conscious thinking to the left is high, so I decide. Everything is under control. I know what's going on. I decide. Our subconscious automatic brain does not decide, which is that yellow axis you got across from left to right. So keep calm and carry on. Everything is all right. But what happens when we start worrying? When we start worrying, our conscious thinking starts going down and our lizard brain, automatic subconscious brain starts going up, just gradually. And suddenly we start preoccupying our time. We start squandering time and energy. And you know what? Our brain starts looking for the reasons to confirm the worst. Murphy's Law is really working. We start to see things that can really go bad, and we start to find the ways to confirm it. As time goes by, if we do not control this sense of worry, we enter into fear. And in fear, impaired thinking. We do not think anymore, and we start jumping to conclusions. We want to shut it down. We want to close this problem. We want to make a quick decision because fear hurts. And nobody likes hurt. Nobody likes pain. We don't do anything about it. Then we enter into panic. And that's a fight, flight, freeze, that we don't do anything else. And then we just hit the red button and we want to just eject, disappear from there. What we can control when we control ourselves, our leadership skills, when we go into coaching, for example, either ourselves or with a good coach, is we try to move around the first three areas, because panic, it doesn't make any sense. So we try to find a way to lead fear towards the center to worry, and then from worry to neutral, because neutral is where we can make the best decisions. When we're euphoric, we make bad decisions. When we are fearful or in panic, we make bad decisions as well, which we tend to regret afterwards. I'm going to go to another of the obstacles of the brain. I'm going to ask you a short test. If I ask you, I present to you these two scenarios. Okay, to the left, I can tell you that I survived 200 kilometers in the desert with only 2 liters of water. And to the right is that some time ago I had a relationship with a very known TV financial journalist. And if I asked you, which one of these two do you not believe? And I'm telling you, one is true. One is true. One of those two cases is true. And if I asked you, which one would you not believe? And you would say, this guy walking, desert, that's difficult. Yeah. And then, but that lady there, well, she doesn't really look happy. So I probably believe the first one. Okay. So if I ask you, which one do you not believe? And you said either one or the other, the one on the left, the one to the right, I would tell you, you are lying. And why is that? Because the brain is gullible. There was philosophical dispute 400 years ago between these two philosophers. You have, to the left, you have Spinoza, and to the right, of course, you have Descartes. Spinoza, the one to the left, he said that every information that we perceive from our environment, we would swallow. We would just believe it. So if I told you, right now I'm in Germany, if I told you that last weekend I was at a reception at the American embassy and I met the chancellor, the German chancellor, the first thing your brain would do is believe it. Why? Because it just has to believe it. It's gullible. Descartes, to the right, what he said was something else. He said, okay, I would get that information and then I would decide if it makes sense or not, if it's rational or not, if it's to believe or not, if what this guy is telling me is trustworthy or not, if it's true or not. What happens is that 400 years ago, neuroscience said, for once, that Spinoza, your guy to the left, was right. And this had an evolutive need. It had a reason. And that is that when we were hunting, any information we would share between the tribe had to be believed on the spot. Because that would mean that if we did not believe it, we might be wasting time challenging and questioning whether the information was true or not. And that would jeopardize our chances of survival because we would be wasting time. Another obstacle is the environment. Many times our education system has not been designed to teach us the ABCD, but the OBEY. In other words, the obey. What happens when a child who's 2 or 3 years old starts emancipating? He or she wants to start showing his or her independence. What happens when we take that kid and we screw it really tight to the chair in a classroom for the next 12, 15 years, and with the expectation of finding a job where they would also be screwed to a chair in an office for the next 40 years? That we end up being products of a system that just conforms with the rule, where we just have to replicate what everybody else is doing. And why is that? Because we're a product of the reality that we as a community are sharing. So in other words, our environment is blocking us. So we've seen already some obstacles. So if we come to a conclusion, okay, what does it mean then to be well? We decided that being well is not an option, that being happy is not an option, that feeling happy is very temporary. So we're aiming at being well. What would that mean in the long run? And what I would like to propose you is to combine two things. One, to the left, the nucleus accumbens we already mentioned, which is the pleasure, and that interacting with the frontal left lobe in the front above our left eyebrow of our brain, that is involved with a sense of transcendence. If you've ever seen a sunset or a sunrise, if you ever sat on a mountain hill or on a mountaintop, or you looked at the sea, or just looked at a little baby sleeping, that sense of greatness, of being bigger than ourselves. When we put these things together, pleasure and transcendence, we'll probably come up with a very interesting formula that brings into focus for our motivation or motiv-action in the long run. So what would be then a happiness formula as a proposal? That would be 4 P's. We have pleasure, we have purpose, what for, why are we doing what we're doing? Profoundness, in other words, that we enter into flow, as Mihaly said, and position. In other words, we have pleasure, we have purpose, we have profoundness, but we also have to be in the right place at the right time. So if we have these 4 P's, would we consider that we are feeling well? Maybe and maybe not. What if the brain's ultimate purpose would not be being well? Let's talk about some very, very old ingredients in life. What if we knew the meaning of life, the strive for excellence, when we add up individual and collective well-being, planning and reflecting on life? In other words, we get to know what life is about. We perceive our own limitations. We know we're not going to be eternal. It's very likely that in 50, 100 years, nobody's really going to remember who we were. And we are aware that our principles and values might shift with time. And at some point, we start just plainly accepting life as it is. What if we stop being pushed around by sudden emotions of extreme joy and sudden emotions of extreme sadness or melancholy? What if we kept fairly neutral? These are the ingredients, according to a research study called the Berlin Project, the Berlin Wisdom Project, which is called wisdom. These are the ingredients of wisdom. And this might actually be the last purpose and goal of our brain. So, but wisdom is not just a philosophical thing. There is a circuitry for brain wisdom. And this is what you have there. The dorsolateral prefrontal cortex is focused on I come first. I am most important. I am what counts. But then we have other parts of the brain, which is the second point there, where we focus on the others, on the well-being of the others. The others come first. But then there's the cingulate anterior cortex, which acts as a referee. So when we find our balance between I come first and the others come first, we come to the conclusion that we are all wired in our brain. We are all wired to be wise, not happy, but wise. So, conclusions. Maybe coaching and life, it doesn't really have an official meaning. We just choose to be well. We cannot control action and we cannot control the result. We can control part of the action and we cannot control the result. We have the expectation of a positive result, but yet we have the power to decide. And then we have point number 3. We have the genetic baggage. Okay, the important thing is to know ourselves from the genetic point of view, even though the old Greeks already mentioned it a couple thousand years ago, and the balance with learning, which is build yourself, which is what the brain calls neurogenesis and neuroplasticity, our capacity, a lifelong capacity to learn, which is also what Kierkegaard, the Danish philosopher, said. Okay, build yourself. 4, habits are crucial because 95% of our habits are automatic. Number 5, we are depending very much on who we are with. 6, the decisions we make every life have to do with 3 things. Either we choose to survive, either we choose to live, enjoy life, or that we choose to live a legacy. And the 7th and last and more important conclusion is, at every crossroads in life, we have to decide, are we going to leave things as they are? Are we just going to conform? Are we going to leave things as they are? Or are we going to rebel? And if we're going to rebel, isn't that wisdom after all? Or isn't that coaching after all? Isn't that leadership after all? Thank you very much. These are the ideas I wanted to share with you. I want to thank Helena de Moink for the organization, Oxygen4Leadership, for this summit, this absolutely outstanding summit. I want to thank you all for being there. And as a wrap up and as a thank you note, I would like to invite you, if you feel like it, is to download, especially if you're a Spanish speaker, you can just feel free to download 42 Ways to Hack Your Brain. We summarize a little bit this presentation. And I'll be looking forward to keeping in touch with you. You can find me there, social media, on the internet, on Google. You can find us all there. And I'll be very glad to keep up the conversation with you all. Thank you very much. Cheers. All the success. Thank you.